Here with AJ Roberts of Westside Barbell. We're down here at the SPF Outlaw Meet. AJ just hit a nice and really easy 910, was it? 910?
910, yeah.
910 bench at super heavyweight, 5-pound PR. I think he actually moved up to number one on the board at super heavyweight on the bench, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, congrats on that, AJ. Tell me about your plans for next year and what you're looking to do now that the 308 records bar has been raised a little bit, and tell me your plans.
Yeah, I'm going to cut back down to 308 in March and take a stab at the record. I've been working my squat real hard, and hopefully that comes together. If I put the 3 lifts together, then I'll have a good shot at it. But of course, with the other guys lifting too, it's anyone's game there. But I'll do that, and then probably beef back up, try to get it up to 320 to 5, maybe 330 for the Pro-Am in August, and go at super heavyweight and just take a run at trying to get the biggest total I can. So they're the only 2 meets I have planned. I'll probably drop a bench only meet in there somewhere, but right now that's what my mind's focused on.
All right, AJ, I got to commend you on your progress over the last mainly 2 years, but probably the last 3 years or so. You can see the momentum starting about 3 years ago, and your total's up over 300 pounds in the last couple of years. You can't help but wonder what's in the water up there in Columbus. Anything in particular that you think's really helped aside from that at body weight?
We've been playing around with our training cycles a lot. We went back to more of a traditional Westside approach for the squat. They'd moved away from 3-week waves on the dynamic day, and we're doing a lot more heavy work twice a week. We went back to back it off one day and going heavy the other, and that has really helped push up the squat and then the deadlift too. We've been experimenting a lot with deadlift and really working on technique with that, and really building up the weak points. And so it's become more of a staple. A lot of people recognize Westside and say that we don't pull. We went to pulling pretty much at least once a week, sometimes twice, once for speed, once heavy, a variation, and that's obviously done good. Everyone's deadlifts up. And then as far as the bench goes, we're actually getting in the bench shirt every 3rd week now, whereas before it was really maybe once or twice before a competition. We figured if you get stronger, without the shirt, then you put it on, you carry over, which is true to a point. But with the way the shirts are now, you have to get used to the pressure, you have to get used to the weight in your hand, and so going once form technique, and just to keep that in the mind, you don't want any surprises at the meet. So we've been going in the shirts every 3rd week, and that's really helped everyone. You guys probably seen Dave's list from last week. He just broke that 308 world record. So yeah, all that combined has really made a big difference.
Yep. Now, tell me, what do you think? What do you think about the younger lifters that ask you for help? When you have someone like yourself who's advanced, you mainly attack weak points. You have the lift down, but there's certain things that are holding you back. What do you usually tell a person? How do you tell them nicely when they just got to get stronger overall and they don't have much of a base? How do you usually handle that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with young lifters is they believe the gear is what makes the difference. And so, number one, they want to switch gear and try new gear all the time. But most of the time, they need to spend the time working the technique and getting stronger in all the areas, the main muscle groups, that need to be strengthened. And so, the way we approach it, they do the same as us, but when it comes to, accessory movements and stuff like that, it's a lot more, big movement work. And when they start to see, that the technique's not right in the squat, getting a new suit is not going to help. They have to build the hamstrings, the glutes, the hips. And once they start to see that, they kind of get into the program. But it's tough because young lifters are very weight heavy. They want to just keep adding to the bar, and we have to emphasize technique, and then the strength comes in those assisted exercises, doing big compound movements, and not isolation movements, which at our level, we do a lot more isolation to bring up weak points. So it is tough because a lot of time their mindset is in a different place than where it needs to be. But I think a lot of the times they trust you, and as long as you explain it to them, they seem to grasp it. So we've had great success kind of just explaining it to them and then keeping them to the basic compound movements, and they as soon as they make progress, they believe. So that's the best thing.
Right. Let's go into a little bit about Dave Hoff. Guys, I've been on a tear for the last 2 years. It's ridiculous. It's kind of sad, for people in 275 weight class and now 308. But at the same time, you got to think to about 5 years ago when Travis Mash hit a 24:14 at 220. Granted the gear was different and all that stuff, but it doesn't matter. Ed Cohn was way far ahead of way far ahead on every level than anyone.
Right.
But the gear had been the same for a while, and you didn't have anyone hardly breaking 22 at 220. And then he busts out with a 2400. Well, the gear really hasn't changed much in the last 5 years since then. And now you got Frankel, who totaled 2715 at that same body weight. Now, with that said, I think it's good for people to set the bar. It's been proven, with Olympic weightlifting and other, 3-minute mile, all that stuff, that you got to have someone ahead of you to push you and to set the bar high. And that way, the human mind's very powerful, and you believe things are achievable. A couple years ago, you wouldn't be thinking that a 275er is looking at totaling 3,000 pounds, and when he's been wearing the same gear for the last few years.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dave, a lot of people say Dave's a phenom, Dave's this, Dave's that. Honestly, Dave's one of the hardest working guys I know in the gym. He dedicated his life to powerlifting, everything he does, social life, in the gym, everything is centered around powerlifting. He's a true fan of the sport. He's a true workhorse in the gym. Obviously he's been in an environment since he was 15 years old under the watchful eye of Louis, and then his, training partners, Bob Coe and Joe Jester and those guys. And, so he's been in that perfect environment for a long time. But, he's had to really work on his lifts and figure out what works for him. And he's just one of those guys that's never going to quit. He has a great mental attitude, and then obviously the physical capabilities too. And by him pushing it the way he's done, I think he proved that you don't have to be a super heavyweight to total huge. You're seeing a lot of guys obviously dieting down or starting to open their minds up to bigger totals at lighter weight. Frankel pushed up the light weights, by him, totaling what he did. You've seen the 181 record go up. I think the 165 record go up. And I think you're going to see, probably in the next year, you're going to see 3-4 guys go over 3,000. With Dave probably being the next one. And maybe the Finn as well. And then Henry Thompson, I'm sure you're going to see a 1,300-pound squat out of him. And I think all of this comes from, these guys pushing the totals up so big. It makes the mindset a little different, and people start to believe that they can achieve it. And, once one person does it, then you see a whole flood of others coming along. And so it's great for the sport, and I think it's only going to get better. And like you said, the gear really hasn't changed. The canvas squat suit's been around for 10 years now. Phenom bench shirt's been around for 5. The first 1,000 pound was by G.
Yeah, Rajstock hit it. What year is it, 2005 or 06?
Yes, I think it was 06 maybe. And you've seen those numbers keep going up, and a lot of it is guys are very aware of how they need to train, and so it's very specific now. And I just think you're going to keep seeing it go up.
Yep. And going back, you were talking about how West Side's always evolving, and the training's changed. I think got to give a little credit to Rick Hussey, who kind of was the pioneer with being in your gear all the time.
Right.
And at some point it seemed ridiculous that they'd be in the shirt or the suit for 10 out of 11 weeks or 12 out of 12 weeks. I mean, but you got to think those guys knew their gear and knew their form like no one else. And
right.
It's something that needs to be done to be the best at what you're doing.
Yeah, like I said, we're always hammering technique. And so if you put a piece of equipment on that alters your technique in any way because of its tightness, the pressure buildup, that kind of stuff, you have to learn how to handle that. And at a certain point in the game is more about what you can handle under the weight versus how strong you are. It becomes that game. It's what makes it a sport, what makes the skill level so high. And like you said, Rick really pushed the barrier there with those guys in the gear. And although we don't go as often as him, it's definitely, we looked at that and took stuff from it, as Rick did from Westside and from Lou. And I think that you're seeing around the country a lot of training programs now, incorporation of a lot of different philosophies and stuff, and it all falls under what works. And I think that once you figure out the perfect, I want to say, cycle for yourself, because everyone's slightly different as far as recovery times and how often they need to be in the gear. Once you can figure that all out, then you can kind of forget about trying to figure it out, and you can just train. And when you start to do that, when you start to just focus on getting stronger again because the other stuff's in place, then that's when the numbers push up. And I think that's a point where most of the top level lifters are at now. They've kind of figured out what works, and they put it into a system. Now they're just focused on getting strong. You're seeing those numbers go up and up and up every meet. And I think that it's an exciting year coming in 2012. You're going to see some big stuff, I think.
Yeah, and that's two good examples are you and Hoff. You jumped from 2650 where you missed a few deadlifts at end of meets, where you're going to break 27 and just didn't happen. And then you jumped from a 2650 to a 2825, and it wasn't that you all of a sudden got strong. You had everything dialed in, and then a couple things went your way, and then boom,
Right.
now you're sitting at almost a mid 28 now. So, Anyway, AJ, it was great to interview you, man. It's always a good time talking to you. Good luck in March, and you got the better of me in August. You know, we were really close on the coefficient, but you know, what can you say? You lose to AJ Roberts and Dave Hoff. You know, you're pretty much expected to. So we'll see how it all pans out this year. And thanks a lot for your time, AJ.
Thanks, appreciate it.